Every October, fog rolls into the Oregon coast, and with it, she appears. I thought it was just a story, till she followed me home. I grew up hearing about the Morning Woman of Cannon Beach. Locals believe she wanders the same stretch of coastline every October, searching for the sun she lost centuries ago. They also say if you see her in the fog, you'll dream of drowning. I didn't believe them until I saw her myself. I moved to Cannon Beach just over a year ago. A quaint little town on the northern Oregon coast with more lighthouses than I could count, and enough ghost stories to haunt my nightmares. When I first toured the house, there wasn't a single scratch or mark on the walls. Now, though, scratches snake up the back door like a spider crawled up the paint and left its mark. I haven't seen a spider up there, but I have seen her. It was a foggy afternoon last October when I stepped out back for the first time. There she was, standing at the edge of my lawn, barefoot, wearing what looked like an old nightgown, her back to me, staring at the ocean. Even from far away I could tell how thin she was. Her ankles and arms were sticks, and she seemed to fade into the gray mist around her. I wanted to call out to her, but my throat closed up, and no sound came out. All I could do was stare as she slowly turned around. She had the face of an old woman, pale and wrinkled, like she hadn't slept in years. But it was her eyes that truly terrified me. They were bottomless pits of endless sadness. She took a step toward me and vanished into the fog. I couldn't believe what I'd seen, so I went back inside, locked the door, and tried to convince myself that I was imagining things. That night, though, I woke up soaking wet. My sheets and blankets were soaked through, and a thick layer of fog clung to the room, obscuring the shapes of the furniture. I threw open my windows to clear the air, but all I got was a lungful of cold salt water. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Then I noticed something else. Tiny pebbles and grains of sand were stuck to my skin. I pulled back the curtains to check the beach. The wind had shifted, and now the tide was coming in. Had I been lying in the path of the incoming tide? No, it had been high tide when I went to bed. And that wasn't the only thing out of place. As the day wore on, I found more seaweed in my bed, more pebbles on the windowsills. It was like the sea itself had somehow crawled inside my house. Fear wormed its way into my gut and coiled around my heart. Was this some sort of sick joke played by the locals? But why would they do that to me? As dusk settled and the fog rolled in again, I heard footsteps outside, slow-dragging footsteps. I peeked out the window to see a hunched figure making their way up my driveway. It was her. She was here. And she wasn't alone. This time she was dragging something behind her, something big. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I stumbled back, knocking over a chair. Footsteps on the stairs. She stopped at the top, and for a moment I thought maybe she was going to come inside. Then she turned around. This time, I was ready. I called out to her, but my voice caught in my throat. She began to speak, and although I couldn't hear the words, I felt their impact. It was like icy fingers raking down my spine. She was telling me about the boy, about how he died on these very cliffs, about how she searched for his body for days before finally finding him, lifeless, washed up on the beach below. She shuffled back to the edge of my yard and vanished into the mist. But she didn't go back to the ocean. Instead, she came closer. She was standing directly outside my bedroom window, and I could feel her eyes boring into me, even though I couldn't see her. Then she was gone. I spent the night curled up in the corner of my room, too afraid to sleep, too afraid to move. But when I finally did drift off, I dreamed of being underwater, woke up to scratching. At first it was faint, like fingernails on wood, but it grew louder, more insistent. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and listened. Someone was definitely out there. I threw on a robe and slippers and crept to the back door. Peeking out into the gray dawn, I saw hundreds of tiny pebbles scattered across the grass, all facing the house as if hundreds of tiny feet had marched them into position, but there was no one out there. I went back inside and made myself some breakfast, trying to calm my racing heart. Maybe it was all just stress, anxiety about my new home, my new life. Maybe I really had been imagining things. But I knew that wasn't true, because as I poured myself a cup of coffee, I noticed more seaweed on the floor, and the scratches on the back door were now deeper. Over the next few weeks, the scratches became more pronounced, inching closer and closer to my windows. I tried to ignore them, to convince myself that I was safe inside my house, but I couldn't help but wonder, how much longer would she be gone? One evening, I heard her voice again, whispering my name, calling to me from just beyond my window. I wanted to respond, but no sound would come out. Then she started to hum, and as she sang, the scratches on the door began to glow. A soft, eerie light emanated from each mark, illuminating swirls and patterns that weren't there before. Suddenly, the humming stopped. I dared to open the window a crack and leaned out, bracing myself for what I might see. The scratching had stopped too, and the space outside my window, normally cluttered with pebbles and seaweed, was bare.
Ow.
There wasn't a single grain of sand or blade of grass out of place. I carefully climbed out onto my window ledge and onto the roof. On the ground below, I could see small footprints leading away from my house and down the hill. I slid down the roof and followed them. They led me to a clearing where hundreds of smooth gray pebbles were arranged in a circle. In the center was a shallow depression, like a handprint in the dirt. And surrounding that were more footprints leading down toward the beach. Curiosity, fear, and morbid fascination warred within me. What would I find if I followed her footprints? Then I heard her voice again. This time it was clearer, closer. She was right behind me. I turned, but there was no one there. When I looked back at the circle of stones, I saw that they had moved. They weren't arranged in a circle anymore. They were pointed directly at me. And in the center of the circle, pressed into the soft dirt, was a single word spelled out in pebbles. Run now. I don't usually run. I'm not a runner. But those pebbles were moving fast, and whatever she was doing out here wasn't normal, and it scared me. So I ran. I ran away from the beach, away from the ocean, away from the house that had become a prison. As I ran, I could hear her behind me, her footsteps echoing my own, getting closer. I burst through the front door and slammed it behind me, fumbling for the locks, my hands shaking. Outside, the fog had thickened, swirling around the porch, tendrils reaching for me through the cracks in the door. When I finally dared to look out, she was gone. But that doesn't mean she's left me. You see, the ocean is 60 miles away, but I can still hear waves under my floorboards. If you love haunted American legends like this one, stay tuned for more. And let me know in the comments where I should investigate next. Thanks for watching. See you soon.